Hey folks, welcome back to Storyscape. Before we dive into today's spine-chilling tale, I need you to please leave a like and subscribe. Your support is my motivation. It's what keeps me digging up these terrifying stories to share with you. Let's get started with today's story. I glanced at my watch. 2:17 a.m. Another 3 hours loomed ahead. A stretch of time I'd fill with the same old patrol I've done for years. I unscrewed the cap of my thermos, took a sip of lukewarm coffee, and grimaced at the bitter taste that stuck to my tongue. It's lousy coffee, but it's been my companion through countless nights at Site 17. This place is a decommissioned Cold War bunker, buried 50 feet under a forest nobody visits. The concrete corridors echo with every step I take, the air cold and thick with the smell of damp stone and rust. Scents I've gotten used to after 5 years. The lights overhead flickered just enough to play tricks on my eyes, so I adjusted my flashlight, sweeping its beam across the stained walls, streaked red-brown from decades of water seeping through. This is my life. Has been since I started here. I'm not some thrill-seeker chasing adventure. I like the routine. Same rounds, same silence, same empty tunnels. It fits me, especially after my dad, Dr. Henry Thompson, disappeared. He was a scientist here in the 80s, working on something he kept vague about. Then one day, he didn't come home. They said it was an accident, a collapse in some sealed-off section, but I never bought it. Too many gaps in the story, too few answers. Maybe that's why I'm here, though I'd never say it out loud. The monotony keeps those questions buried, along with a fear of the dark I've had since I was a kid. I turned into Corridor B, my flashlight cutting through the shadows. Site 17's a maze. Miles of tunnels and locked rooms, supposedly just storage for old military gear, crates of junk, rusted filing cabinets, relics from a war that never happened. That's the official line, but I've always wondered why a place this huge, this deep, needs guards if it's really abandoned. I pushed the thought aside, like always, and kept moving. The only sounds were my boots and the drip of water from the ceiling, a rhythm I've memorized over countless shifts. Another thrilling night, I muttered, my voice dull in the quiet. I thought of Mike, the day shift guy who'd take over at dawn. He's probably crashed in the break room right now, snoring over a sandwich. Mike's the type to laugh off anything weird I'd tell him about this place. Call it a ghost story, born from too much coffee and not enough sleep. Maybe he'd be right. My route took me past the old control room, its dead switches and blank screens staring at me like hollow eyes. I didn't hang around. That place always gives me the creeps, though I'd never admit it. I headed down to Corridor C, the air getting colder as I went down a shallow ramp. My flashlight lit up faded stencils on the walls. C12, C14, labels that don't mean much to me anymore. I was halfway down when I stopped dead. I heard something. It was low, like a heartbeat thumping through the concrete. I tilted my head, frowning at the odd sound. It wasn't the usual groans of metal, or the weak hum of the ventilation system. This was deeper, alive somehow. I held my breath, listening hard. It seemed to come from further down, toward Corridor D. My thumb brushed the edge of my flashlight as I hesitated. Probably a pipe, I told myself, or the generator acting funny again. But even as I thought it, the hum got stronger, buzzing in my chest like someone hit a tuning fork too hard. I should have turned back, reported it, let maintenance sort it out. That's what the manual says. Don't poke around, just log it. But I stood there, frozen, my flashlight shaking a little in my hand. 5 years here, and I'd never heard anything like this. My stomach twisted, that old kid fear of the dark creeping up. Get a grip, Jack, I grumbled to myself, and started walking. Corridor D's a dead end. One I've walked 100 times. It's short, lined with a few crates, and ends at a plain concrete wall. Nothing special. I swung my flashlight down it as I got closer, the hum growing louder with every step. It vibrated through my boots now, prickling my skin. I reached the end, expecting the usual. Nothing. But there was a door. I froze, my breath snagging in my throat. My flashlight beam landed on a heavy, rusted metal slab set right into the wall. It wasn't on any map I'd ever seen, and I memorized those maps my first month here. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. This door didn't belong. It was off, like it had been plunked down from somewhere else. Strange, sharp symbols were scratched into it, glowing faintly blue-green under my light. They pulsed, shifting as I stared. This wasn't here, I said out loud, my voice lost in the hum. I dug out the folded map from my pocket, fumbling with it one-handed while keeping the flashlight on the door. Corridor D was just a line on the paper, ending flat. No doors, no nothing. I ran my finger along it, double-checking. 5 years, and I'd never seen this. My mind spun. Maybe I'd missed it somehow, zoned out on the routine. But those glowing symbols, that hum, it wasn't some overlooked closet. I should have walked away, told my supervisor in the morning. My gut was yelling at me to do that, fear knotting up cold in my stomach. Whatever was behind that door, it was the kind of dark I've spent my life dodging. Then I thought of my dad, Henry Thompson, with his messy hair and big ideas, always going on about breakthroughs. We're on the brink of something big, Jack, he told me once, eyes lit up. Something that could change everything. One of the last things he said before he vanished, right here in this bunker. I'd stopped digging for answers after that. Until now, my hand hovered over the handle, a thick, rusted bar with no lock I could see. It was ice cold under my fingers. I swallowed, the hum pounding in my ears, drowning out everything else. Curiosity pulled harder than the fear. I grabbed the handle and yanked. The door creaked open, a deep grinding noise bouncing down the corridor. Stale air rushed out, sharp with a metallic bite that stung my nose. Beyond was darkness, thicker than the bunker's usual shadows. I raised my flashlight, its beam slicing a thin path inside. It was a chamber, round, maybe 30 feet wide, nothing like the rest of Site 17. The walls curved up to a dome I couldn't see, covered in more of those weird symbols. They glowed brighter here, throwing eerie light across the floor. In the middle was a machine, shiny, metallic, and totally out of place, not rusted or old like everything else down here. It looked brand new, pulsing with that same hum that dragged me in. Lights blinked along its edges, faint and uneven, like it was breathing. I stepped in, my boots scraping the floor. The air felt heavy, squeezing my chest. I circled the machine, keeping back, my flashlight shaking as I tried to figure it out. It was tall, about 8 feet, with a wide base and a thinner column sticking up, topped with jagged spikes. The symbols on the walls moved when I looked at them, slipping away like they didn't want to be seen. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. I edged closer. Couldn't help it. The hum ramped up, rattling my skull, and the air got warm, electric. My head spun, dizzy, And then, I wasn't in the bunker. For a heartbeat, everything changed. I saw a red sky, streaked with twisting clouds like smoke. Strange buildings rose in the distance, tall and sharp, bending wrong. Shadows zipped across the ground, too fast, coming at me with intent. Static screamed in my ears, and dread hit me like a punch, colder than anything in Site 17. I knew that place, not from memory, but from some gut-deep instinct that made me want to run. Then it snapped back. I was in the chamber again, gasping, my flashlight hitting the floor with a clatter. The hum kept going, steady, but the vision was gone. I pressed a hand to my chest, my heart slamming against my ribs. What was that? My voice broke, barely cutting through the machine's pulse. I stumbled back, grabbing my flashlight. The beam jerked around, glinting off the machine. As I turned to get out, I spotted something, a small metal thing near the base. I bent down, hands trembling, and picked it up. It was a key, old and fancy, carved with the same symbols as the door. It felt heavy, too cold in my hand. I stared at it, then the machine, then the walls, their glow fading like they knew I was there. I bolted out, shoving the key in my pocket. I slammed the door shut, the metal's groan ringing in my ears. I leaned against the wall, trying to breathe, my head a mess. Maybe I'd imagined it. Too long underground, not enough rest. But the key's weight was real, the hum still buzzing faintly through the concrete. I checked my watch. 2:23 a.m. Just 6 minutes, though it felt like forever. I could report it, tell my boss about the door, the machine, that vision. But what would I say? Saw another world? They'd think I'd cracked, stick me in a shrink's office, maybe can me. Mike would never let me hear the end of it. No, I wasn't telling anyone. Not yet. But I couldn't shake it. That machine, those symbols, they weren't from the Cold War. And that vision, it felt like a warning, or something I'd forgotten, or both. I thought of my dad again, how he'd talked about his work. Project Echo, initiated 1985. I'd seen scratched into the machine before the vision hit. 1985, the year he went missing. I straightened up, wiping sweat off my face. The hum was quieter now, but it wouldn't stop. I glanced at the door, blending back into the wall like it had always been there. Part of me wanted to finish my shift, act like nothing happened. But another part, the part still chasing my dad, knew I couldn't let it go. 2 days had passed since I found the hidden door, and I was a wreck. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. That red sky, those twisted shapes, that feeling of being watched. Was it real? Or was my mind cracking under the weight of too many night shifts? Too many hours alone in this concrete tomb? I wanted to believe it was just exhaustion, some trick of the brain brought on by flickering lights and stale air. But the key in my pocket said otherwise. Cold, solid, real. I'd found it behind that door, in that strange chamber, and it was proof that what I'd seen wasn't just in my head. I had to go back. It was my next shift, a Tuesday night. When I made up my mind, the bunker was quiet as always. The kind of quiet that presses in on you until you can hear your own heartbeat. I went through my rounds like a robot, checking locks, testing alarms, shining my flashlight down empty corridors. But my thoughts were elsewhere, stuck on that hidden door in Corridor D. My hands shook as I finished up, and by the time I stood in front of it, my mouth was dry, my pulse racing. The door looked the same as last time, heavy steel, rusted at the edges, with faint symbols scratched into its surface. They weren't glowing now, not like they had when I'd first stepped through, but I remembered how they'd pulsed with that eerie light. I reached for the handle, then stopped. What if it wasn't there anymore? What if it was? And something worse happened this time. I could turn around, finish my shift, go home, and pretend none of this ever happened. But I'd never been good at letting things go. Not since Dad disappeared. I took a deep breath, the air smelling of damp concrete and old metal, and pushed the door open. The chamber was just as I'd left it. The air hit me first. Thick, almost electric, like the moment before a storm. In the center stood the machine, sleek and metallic, its cylindrical base humming steadily. Lights blinked along its edges, a slow rhythm that felt alive, like a heartbeat. The walls were covered in those symbols, glowing faintly now, casting strange shadows that danced across the floor. I closed the door behind me and stepped inside, my boots echoing in the stillness. The hum filled my ears, vibrating through my chest, and I felt a chill, despite the sweat beading on my forehead. It was like the room was watching me, waiting. I walked toward the machine, slow and careful, my flashlight beam cutting through the dimness. Up close, it was even more intimidating, about 7 feet tall, with a column rising from the base and sharp protrusions jutting out at odd angles. The metal was smooth, almost polished. Not a speck of rust, despite the years it must have sat here. I circled it, looking for anything I might have missed last time. That's when I saw the etching at the base. Project Echo, initiated 1985. My stomach dropped. Dad's project. He'd worked here, back when Site 17 was active, and he'd mentioned Echo once or twice. Always vague, always with that faraway look in his eyes. Was this what he'd been part of? Was this why he never came home? I stood there, staring at the words, my mind racing. Memories flooded in. Dad showing me around the bunker when I was 8, his big hand holding mine as he pointed out control panels and blast doors. "This place keeps us safe," he'd said. But he never explained from what. I wished I'd asked more questions. Pressed him harder. Maybe then I'd have some idea what I was dealing with now. I shook my head, pushing the thoughts away. I shouldn't touch it again. Last time, it had knocked me flat, sent me somewhere I couldn't explain. My nose had bled for 10 minutes after, and I'd been dizzy for hours, but I had to know. Was it a fluke? A one-time glitch? Or was it real? And if so, what did it mean? My hand hovered over the machine, trembling. Part of me screamed to walk away, but another part, the part that wouldn't let Dad's disappearance rest, pushed me forward. I had to see it again. I had to understand. With a mix of fear and stubbornness, I pressed my palm against the cool metal surface. The moment I made contact, a jolt shot through me, sharp and electric, like touching a live wire. My vision blurred. The chamber dissolved, and then I was somewhere else. The sky was blood red, streaked with dark clouds that twisted like smoke, caught in a windstorm. I stood on cracked, barren ground. The air so hot it felt like it was cooking me from the inside out. Every breath burned my throat, tasting of sulfur and ash. And I coughed, my eyes watering. The heat wrapped around me, oppressive, making my shirt stick to my skin. The sky was blood red, streaked with dark clouds that twisted like smoke caught in a windstorm. I stood on cracked, barren ground. The air so hot, it felt like it was cooking me from the inside out. Every breath burned my throat, tasting of sulfur and ash, and I coughed, my eyes watering. The heat wrapped around me, oppressive, making my shirt stick to my skin within seconds. I looked down and saw the earth beneath my feet, jagged and uneven, shifting slightly as I moved, like it was alive or ready to collapse. I turned, trying to get my bearings, and that's when I saw them. The buildings. They rose in the distance, tall and angular, their shapes defying logic, spires twisted upward at impossible angles, made of some dark, shimmering material, like oil on water, catching the red light in strange patterns. They weren't buildings in any normal sense. They looked wrong, unstable, yet there they stood, piercing the sky. Symbols glowed faintly on their surfaces, the same ones from the chamber, pulsing with a rhythm I could almost feel. I took a step toward them, drawn despite the fear clawing at my chest. The ground trembled under me, and I stumbled, catching myself before I fell. It was like walking on a ship in a storm, the earth swaying and cracking with every move. I steadied myself and kept going, needing to see more, to understand where I was. As I got closer, I reached out to touch one of the spires. My hand passed right through it, the surface rippling like smoke before reforming. I tried again, but the same thing happened. It was as if I was a ghost here, unable to touch anything, just an observer in this alien place. That's when I felt it, the presence. It hit me like a punch, a weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I froze, my heart pounding, and turned slowly. In the shadows between two spires, something moved. It was tall, humanoid, but not human, its form blending with the darkness. Long limbs, a featureless face, and then eyes. Two glowing points, faint but piercing, locked on me. My skin crawled, and I took a step back, my boots crunching on the shifting ground. "What are you?" I tried to shout, but my voice came out as a rasp, swallowed by the thick air. The figure tilted its head like it was curious and raised a hand, pointing at me. My stomach twisted. Was it trying to communicate? Threaten me? I couldn't tell, but the fear was overwhelming now, a primal urge to run screaming through me. I backed away, my eyes fixed on it. The ground shook harder, a crack splitting open near my feet. I jumped aside, barely avoiding the gap, and the shadow seemed to react, its form stretching and shifting. Those glowing eyes never left me, and I felt their weight, their intelligence, boring into me. I couldn't take it anymore. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself out of this place. This isn't real, I told myself. It's a vision, a dream, something the machine did to me, but it felt real. The heat, the smell, the terror, all too vivid to dismiss. Just as I thought I was trapped, the world snapped back. I was on the floor of the chamber, sprawled like I'd been thrown there. My head throbbed, a sharp pain splitting through my skull, and I gasped for air. The coolness of the bunker, shock after that burning heat. My vision swam, the glowing symbols blurring into streaks of light. I reached up and touched my face. My nose was bleeding again, warm and sticky, dripping onto my shirt. I wiped it with my sleeve, leaving a red smear, and sat up slowly, dizziness washing over me. My stomach churned, and for a moment, I thought I'd be sick. I leaned against the wall, the cold concrete grounding me, and took deep breaths until the nausea passed. What the hell was that place? That thing watching me? My hands shook as I fumbled for my flashlight, its beam steadying me somehow. I shone it on the machine, half expecting it to look different, but it was the same, humming, blinking, indifferent to what it had just done to me. I should have left right then, packed my stuff, quit the job, and never set foot in Site 17 again. The thought crossed my mind, loud and clear, but I couldn't. Not now. Not when I was so close to something. Something tied to Dad, to Project Echo, to whatever this machine was. I'd spent years wondering what happened to him, and this was the first real lead I'd ever had. I couldn't walk away, no matter how scared I was. I forced myself to my feet, legs wobbly, and pulled out my phone. If I was going to do this, I needed proof, something to show I wasn't losing my mind. I started taking pictures, snapping shots of the machine from every angle. The flash lit up the chamber, making the symbols flare briefly before fading back to their faint glow. My phone's screen flickered once or twice, the images distorting for a split second before clearing. Was the machine messing with it? I didn't know, but I kept going, zooming in on the etching. Project Echo, initiated 1985, and the blinking lights. When I'd taken dozens of photos, I stuffed the phone back in my pocket and grabbed my notebook and pencil. I flipped it open to a blank page and started sketching the symbols on the walls. They were complex, sharp angles and curves that didn't follow any pattern I could figure out. Some looked like letters, others like math symbols, but nothing I recognized. My hand moved fast, trying to capture their shapes before they slipped from my memory. As I drew, I noticed something odd. The symbols seemed to change, subtle shifts in their lines, like they were moving or reacting to me. I blinked, thinking it was just my eyes, still messed up from the vision, but it kept happening. The glow from the walls pulsed in time with the machine's hum, and I wondered if they were connected, a language or a code that controlled it. If only I could crack it, maybe I'd understand what this thing was, what it wanted. I whispered to myself as I worked, my voice barely audible over the hum. Dad, what were you into? What is this place? No answer, of course, but it made me feel less alone. I imagined him standing beside me, his broad shoulders filling the space, explaining it all with that calm, steady voice of his. But in my mind, he just smiled sadly and faded away, leaving me with nothing but questions. My hands cramped after a while, and my notebook was nearly full. Pages covered in shaky sketches of symbols and quick notes about the machine. I stepped back, wiping sweat from my forehead, and looked at it again. It wasn't just a relic, some forgotten piece of Cold War tech. It was alive, active, doing something I couldn't comprehend. A portal? A window? Whatever it was, it had pulled me into that other world, and I had a sinking feeling it wasn't done with me yet. I don't know how long I stayed in that chamber. Hours, maybe. Time felt strange in there, stretched and warped. Finally, I couldn't take the hum anymore, the way it seemed to burrow into my head. I tucked my notebook under my arm, checked my phone, battery at 10%, memory almost full, and headed for the door. I glanced back at the machine one last time, its lights blinking like it was watching me go. I'll figure you out, I muttered, though I wasn't sure I believed it. I stepped into the corridor and closed the door behind me, the hum fading to a dull buzz. The bunker felt different as I walked back, darker somehow, the shadows deeper. My flashlight beam seemed weaker, and every creak of the old structure made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that the place itself knew what I'd done. Ridiculous, sure. It was just a bunch of concrete and steel. But after what I'd seen, I wasn't so certain anymore. I finished my shift in a daze, hurrying through the last checks so I could get out of there. The vision stayed with me. Every detail burned into my brain. The heat, the shifting ground, those glowing eyes. I was scared, more scared than I'd ever been in my life. But there was something else, too. Spark of excitement, a thrill I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Dad disappeared, I was on the edge of something big, something that could explain everything. When I got back to my quarters, I locked the door and sat on my cot, pulling out my phone and notebook. The photos were there, sharp and clear, despite the glitches, and my sketches filled page after page. I didn't know what to do with them yet. Show someone, maybe, or dig into old records about Project Echo. But one thing was certain. I couldn't stop now. Whatever this machine was, whatever that other world meant, it was part of Dad's life, and now it was part of mine. I leaned back against the wall, exhaustion hitting me like a wave. But my mind wouldn't rest. I had to find answers, no matter where they led me, no matter what they cost. The echoes beneath were calling, and I was going to listen. It's been 3 days since I last set foot in that chamber, but it might as well be an eternity. The memory clings to me like damp rot, the twisted spires piercing a blood-red sky, the air thick with heat and sulfur, and that shadow with its glowing eyes boring into my soul. I can't escape it. It's there every time I blink, a relentless echo gnawing at my sanity. I've tried to rationalize it. Stress, exhaustion, a trick of the light. But it's no use. That place wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It was real, and it's connected to something bigger, something tied to my father. I can feel it in my gut, a pull I can't ignore. That's why I'm here now, standing outside Mike's office, my phone heavy with photos in one hand, my notebook stuffed with frantic sketches in the other. I need answers, and I can't do this alone anymore. The bunker's air is stale, oppressive, pressing against my chest as I raise my fist and knock on the steel door. Come in. Mike's voice grunts from the other side, muffled but casual. I push the door open and step into his cramped office. It's a mess. Filing cabinets line the walls, their drawers half open with papers spilling out. A dented coffee maker sits in the corner, its stained pot probably brewing sludge older than my tenure here. And Mike's desk is a battlefield of reports, a sports magazine, and a half-eaten sandwich. He's slouched in his chair, feet propped up, the picture of nonchalance. When he looks up, his bored expression shifts to mild interest. Jack, what's up? You look like hell. He smirks, taking a bite of his sandwich. Seen a ghost or something? I don't smile back. My hands are steady as I set my phone and notebook on his desk, shoving aside a stack of forms. I need to show you something. It's about that door in Corridor D. He swallows, raising an eyebrow. The one you were yammering about last week? I told you, it's just an old storage closet. Nothing to get worked up over. No, Mike, it's not. I unlock my phone and pull up the photos, my fingers trembling slightly, despite my calm tone. Look at these. I slide the phone across to him. He wipes his hands on his pants and takes it, scrolling through the images. The first shots are of the machine, its polished metal surface, the blinking lights, the inscription carved into its side. Project Echo, initiated 1985. Then the symbols on the walls, captured in the dim glow of my flashlight. Their strange curves and angles, almost alive in the frame. Mike's smirk fades as he studies them, his brow creasing. What the hell is this? He mutters, squinting at the screen. It's not just junk, Mike. It's active, humming, glowing, doing something. And it's tied to my dad. I tap the photo of the machine's inscription. His name's on it. Dr. Robert Thompson. He worked on this. Mike's eyes flick up to meet mine, narrowing. Your dad? The scientist who went missing? Yeah. Over 30 years ago. Whatever this is, he was part of it. He leans back, rubbing his jaw, the chair creaking under his weight. Jack, that was decades ago. Whatever they were messing with, it's done. Probably just some old tech they didn't bother hauling out. Then why's it still running? I flip open my notebook, thrusting it toward him. My sketches of the symbols spill across the pages, jagged and hurried. These aren't decorations. They're a code or a language, and when I touched the machine, I saw something. Another place, like a different world. His eyes widen for a split second before he forces a laugh, loud and hollow. Come on, Jack. You're sounding like one of those conspiracy nuts. It's probably a generator or something, humming from leftover power. And visions? You've been pulling too many night shifts. But the photos could be anything. Reflections, bad lighting. He tosses my phone back onto the desk, leaning forward now, his tone sharpening. Listen, don't go poking around in there. It's not safe, and it's not your job. Stick to your rounds, and let maintenance deal with any weird crap. Frustration surges in my chest, hot and tight. Mike, this isn't just weird crap. It's about my dad, about what happened to him. I need to know. He sighs, his expression softening, just a touch. I get it, Jack. Losing your old man like that, it messes with you. But chasing shadows won't change the past. You're a good guard. Don't screw that up over some rusty machine. I clench my fists, nails digging into my palms. He's not hearing me. Not really. But there's something in his eyes, a flicker of unease beneath the bravado. He's dismissing me, sure, but he's rattled. I decide to press one last time. Mike, ever hear of Project Echo? Or anything about dimensional breaches? His face goes blank, a mask snapping into place too fast. Dimensional what? Sounds like sci-fi garbage. Drop it, Jack. That's an order. He stands, brushing crumbs off his shirt, and hands me my notebook. The conversation's over, at least for him. I take it, jaw tight, and mutter, fine. But as I turn to leave, I glance back. He's sunk into his chair again, but he's not flipping through his magazine. He's staring at the wall, fingers tapping nervously on the desk. He knows something. I'd bet my life on it. That night, sleep won't come. Mike's words loop in my head. Old equipment, not your job. Drop it. But they're drowned out by the chamber's pull. A magnetic hum I can almost hear through the bunker's walls. I lie on my cot, the thin mattress creaking under me, staring at the ceiling's cracked concrete. The vision replays itself. The spires, the shadow, the heat. It's not just my imagination. It's a piece of a puzzle I've been chasing since I was old enough to ask why Dad never came home. By 2 a.m., I can't take it anymore. I roll out of bed, pulling on my uniform, dark pants, gray shirt, boots, and grab my flashlight. The bunker is a tomb at this hour, the other guards either snoring or patrolling the outer perimeter. I slip into the halls, my steps quiet but deliberate, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the gloom. Corridor D looms ahead, its shadows thicker than the rest, and my pulse quickens as I near the door. It's unchanged, rusted steel, faintly glowing symbols etched around the frame. I hesitate, Mike's warning clawing at the back of my mind. But then I think of Dad, of the years I've spent with nothing but questions. This is my shot. I push the door open and step inside. The chamber hits me like a wave. The hum is louder tonight, a deep vibration that rattles my teeth and sinks into my bones. The symbols on the walls pulse with light, brighter than before, casting eerie patterns across the concrete. The machine sits in the center, its sleek surface glinting, its lights blinking, in a rhythm that feels almost alive. I swallow hard, my throat dry, and move closer. Up close, the machine is a marvel. Smooth metal, cold to the touch, but buzzing with energy I can feel through my fingertips. I trace the inscription again. Project Echo, initiated 1985. Dad's project. What were you doing here, Dad? What did you find? I circle the chamber, flashlight sweeping over the walls. The symbols are sharper now, their edges biting into the concrete like they've been freshly carved. I run a finger along one, half expecting it to hum or spark, but it's just stone. Cold, unyielding stone. There has to be more here, something I missed last time. As I round the machine's base, my boot nudges something solid. I crouch, aiming the light down, and spot a metal box wedged between the machine and the wall, coated in dust. My hands shake as I pry it free, brushing off decades of grime. It's a file, its cover stamped with faded government seals. Eagles, serial numbers, the works. I wipe the title clean. Project Threshold. Classified. My breath catches. Threshold. That's not Echo. What's going on? I flip it open. The page is brittle and yellowed. Dates from the early 80s stare back at me. 1983, 1984, 1985, alongside memos, diagrams, and handwritten notes. Then I see it. Dr. Robert Thompson, lead scientist. My heart stumbles. Dad's name, right there in black ink. I scan the text, words leaping out like flares. Dimensional breach, quantum stabilization, parallel plane access. It's insane. Science fiction brought to life in a government bunker. One memo stops me cold, dated June 28, 1985. 2. Site 17, Oversight Committee, from Dr. R. Thompson. Subject, prototype activation. The threshold device achieved a partial breach today. 2.9 seconds of stable contact with an alternate plane. Readings suggest a habitable environment, though atmospheric composition is unconfirmed. Visual distortions reported by 3 team members, including myself. Device requires recalibration. Energy output exceeded safety thresholds. Request additional funding and personnel. I reread it, my mind spinning. A breach to another plane. Is that what I saw? Somewhere beyond our world? But Echo and Threshold. Different names. Same tech. I keep flipping. There are schematics, blueprints of the machine, power grids, containment protocols, and a personnel list. Dad's at the top, followed by names I don't know, except one, Dr. Elena Novak. I freeze. Elena Novak, Dad's colleague. She'd come to our house when I was a kid, always stern, always carrying a briefcase. Could she still be out there? The final page is a gut punch, stamped terminated in red ink, dated October 31st, 1985, Dad's last day. Project Threshold, terminated effective immediately. Unstable breaches and personnel incidents deemed unacceptable risks. All equipment to be decommissioned, site sealed. No further dimensional research permitted. No details, no explanation, just a shutdown order. I close the file, my hands trembling. This is it. Proof Dad was part of something massive, something that went wrong. But why is the machine still here? Still humming? If it was scrapped. I stand, tucking the file under my arm. I need to get out. Think this through somewhere safe. But as I turn, a soft click echoes through the chamber, like a latch catching. I freeze, ears straining over the machine's hum. Another guard? Mike checking up? I sweep the flashlight around, but the shadows stay empty. Then I see it. A flicker on the wall, a silhouette stretched and warped by the glowing symbols. My blood turns to ice. It's the shadow from my vision. Tall, humanoid, eyes like twin embers. I stumble back, the beam shaking in my grip. But there's nothing there. Just the machine. The walls. The hum. Get it together, Jack, I mutter, forcing a breath. It's the light. The stress. Nothing real. I head for the door, but the air shifts, dropping cold and sharp. The hum spikes, the machine's lights strobing wildly. I whirl around, and there it is. The shadow, standing by the machine, staring right at me. I blink, and it's gone. The hum steadies. The lights calm. I'm alone, but the chill clings to me, a warning I can't shake. I bolt from the chamber, slamming the door shut, and run down corridor D, boots pounding until I hit the main hall. I slump against the wall, gasping, the file pressed to my chest. Whatever's in that chamber, it's not dead history. It's alive, awake, and it knows I'm here. Back in my quarters, I spread the file across my cot, poring over every page by the dim light of a desk lamp. The science is dense. Equations, energy charts, terms like quantum entanglement I can barely pronounce. But I piece together the basics. Project Threshold aimed to punch a hole into another dimension, using the machine as a gateway. Dad led the charge, testing the limits of reality itself. But the breaches were unstable, dangerous, and someone paid the price. October 31st, 1985. Dad's disappearance, the shutdown. It's all connected, but the gaps taunt me. What went wrong? Why is the machine still active? And that shadow? What the hell is it? I need help. Someone who gets this stuff. Who was there? Dr. Novak's name burns in my mind. If she's alive, she might know the rest. I grab my phone, searching her name. After a few dead ends, I hit an old article. Dr. Elena Novak, Professor Emeritus, UC Berkeley, Physics Department. It's dated 5 years ago, but it's a lead. I scribble down the university's contact info. Tomorrow, I'll call. See if she's still around, still willing to talk. It's a long shot. Classified projects don't exactly invite chit-chat, but I've got nothing else. The bunker creaks around me, a distant groan of metal. I glance at the door, half expecting that shadow to slip through. Every flicker of the lights, every echo, sets my nerves on edge. I tell myself it's just paranoia, but I know better. Something's stirring in Site 17, and I've kicked the hornet's nest. I lean back, the file heavy in my lap. This is for Dad, for the truth he left behind. The hum in my head grows louder, an echo from beneath, and I realize I'm not just chasing answers anymore. I'm in the middle of whatever he started. I've never been one to scare easy. Growing up with a scientist for a dad, I learned early that most things people call mysterious have a logical explanation buried somewhere. But logic's been slipping through my fingers lately, like sand from a broken hourglass. Ever since I found that chamber, touched that machine, and saw that other world, nothing feels solid anymore. And now this, a note, shoved into my locker like some bad movie cliché. My hands shake as I read it again. Stop looking, or you'll regret it. No name, no hint of who left it. Just block letters, scrawled on torn paper, sharp and angry. I'm standing in the locker room of Site 17, the air thick with the smell of rust and old sweat. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting a sickly glow on the concrete walls. My shift's about to start, but I can't move. The note's pinned between my fingers. its edges curling from the damp. Who knows I've been digging? Mike's the only one I told, and even he brushed me off. But that flicker in his eyes, maybe he's not as clueless as he pretends. Or maybe someone else is watching. Someone who doesn't want me poking around Project Threshold. I crumple the note and stuff it into my pocket, glancing around the empty room. The other guards are either out on patrol or catching sleep in the barracks. No one's here to see my hands trembling or the sweat beading on my forehead. Good. I don't need questions, but I do need answers. If someone's trying to scare me off, they must know something. About the machine, about Dad, about whatever's lurking in that other place. I'm not stopping now. Not when I'm this close. First things first. Check the security logs. If someone snuck in here to leave that note, there might be a trace. Something out of place. A door accessed at an odd hour. I head to the control room, my boots echoing down the corridor. The bunker's always quiet at this hour, but tonight it feels heavier, like the walls are leaning in, listening. The control room's a relic. Banks of old monitors, switches labeled with faded ink, and a single computer that's probably older than I am. I log in, my fingers stiff on the keys, and pull up the entry logs for the past 24 hours. Every door, every access point, every shift change. It's all recorded here. I scan the list. Standard patrols, maintenance checks, nothing unusual. My locker's in the main corridor. No special access needed. Anyone could have slipped in while I was on rounds. I lean back in the creaky chair, frustration gnawing at me. No leads, no clues, just a dead end. I rub my eyes, the hum of the fluorescent lights drilling into my skull. Maybe it's a prank. Mike messing with me after our talk. But that doesn't feel right. He's lazy, sure, but not cruel. And the note's tone, it's too sharp, too real. I log out and stand, the chair scraping against the floor. I can't waste time chasing ghosts. If someone's watching, let them watch. I've got bigger things to worry about. Like what I found in that chamber last time. The file on Project Threshold. Dad's name stamped on every page. The shutdown order dated the day he disappeared. And that shadow. The one that flickered in the corner of my vision. Watching me. I haven't told anyone about that. Not yet. It sounds crazy, even to me. But crazy or not, I need to understand. And there's one place I haven't looked yet. Home. Dad's old stuff. Boxed up in the attic after he vanished. Mom never had the heart to throw it out. And when she passed, it all came to me. I've avoided it for years. Too raw. Too painful. But if there's answers, they might be there. I finish my shift in a haze. My mind already halfway out the door. By the time I'm back in my car, the sun's creeping over the horizon, weak and pale. The drive home is a blur of empty roads and skeletal trees. The forest around Site 17, giving way to suburban sprawl. My house is a small, sagging thing on the edge of town. More of a shack than a home. But it's mine. I pull into the driveway, cut the engine, and sit there for a minute. The silence pressing in. The note's still in my pocket. A lead weight. Stop looking, or you'll regret it. I clench my jaw and get out of the car. Inside, the air's stale, thick with the smell of old wood and dust. I kick off my boots and head straight for the attic, pulling down the ladder with a creak. The space above is cramped, filled with boxes and cobwebs, the remnants of a life I've tried to forget. I flick on the single bulb, its light barely cutting through the gloom. There, Dad's boxes, stacked in the corner, labeled in Mom's neat handwriting, Robert's things. I drag them down, one by one, until the living room's floor is a maze of cardboard and memories. Old books, lab notes, framed photos of Dad in his white coat, grinning like he'd just solved the universe's secrets. I swallow hard, pushing down the ache in my chest. Focus, Jack. There's gotta be something here. Something about Project Threshold. About the machine. I tear through the boxes, papers scattering like leaves. Most of it's mundane. Research on particle physics, grant applications, letters from colleagues. But then, at the bottom of the last box, I find it. A leather-bound journal. Its cover worn and cracked. My heart stutters. I've never seen this before. Mom must have packed it away, or maybe Dad hid it. I open it carefully. The page is yellowed and brittle. The first entries are dated from 1983, written in Dad's precise hand. March 12th, 1983. Project Threshold approved. Funding secured. Team assembled. The potential is staggering. If we can stabilize the breach, it could change everything. But the risks. We're walking a razor's edge. I flip ahead, scanning for anything familiar. There are sketches, diagrams of the machine, energy flow charts, and then the symbols. Pages and pages of them, just like the ones in the chamber. Dad's notes are meticulous at first, labeling each one with possible meanings, anchor points, frequency modulators, dimensional keys. But as the dates progress, his writing changes. Hurried, jagged, like he was running out of time. July 19th, 1985. Another partial breach, today. 3 seconds of contact. Visuals are consistent. Red sky, twisted structures, signs of civilization. But the energy spikes are unpredictable. We lost containment for a split second. Lights flickered, and I swear I heard something. A voice, maybe. Need to recalibrate. My stomach twists. He saw it too. The other world. And heard something. That shadow. Did it speak to him? I keep reading. The entries growing more frantic. September the 3rd, 1985. The barriers are weakening. Each breach thins the veil between here and there. We're pulling something through. Or maybe it's pushing back. Nightmares are plaguing the team. Dark figures, eyes in the shadows. I see them too. Even when I'm awake, I think it's watching us. A chill crawls up my spine. The shadow, I wasn't imagining it. Dad saw it too, and it terrified him. I turn the page, my hands shaking. October 28th, 1985. We have to stop. The breaches are tearing holes that won't close. Something's waking on the other side. Something ancient. I've requested a shutdown, but Command wants more data. They don't understand. We're not ready for this. If it crosses over, God help us. The final entry is dated October 30th, 1985, the day before he disappeared. October 30th, 1985. I'm going to destroy it. The machine, the research, everything. It's the only way to keep it sealed. If I don't, it'll find a way through. I've seen it in my dreams, tall, dark, with eyes like dying stars. It knows my name. It knows I'm the key. Tomorrow, I end this. That's it. The last page, torn and smudged, like he'd been interrupted. I sit back on my heels, the journal heavy in my lap. Dad was going to destroy the machine, stop whatever was coming through, but he never got the chance. The next day, he vanished, and Project Threshold was shut down. Officially, anyway. But the machine's still there, still humming, still watching. My mind races, piecing it together. The shadow, the breaches, the warnings. Dad knew something was wrong, something dangerous. And now, 30 years later, I've stumbled into the same trap. The note in my locker, the flicker in Mike's eyes. It's all connected. Someone wants me to stop, just like they stopped Dad. But I can't. Not now. Not when I'm this close to understanding what happened to him, to finishing what he started. I close the journal and stand, my legs stiff from sitting too long. The house is silent, but I can almost hear the hum of the machine, feel its pull even from here. It's awake, and it's waiting. I glance at the clock, 3:47 a.m. My next shift starts in a few hours, but sleep's a lost cause. I need a plan. First, find Dr. Elena Novak. She was on the project, might know what Dad was up to. Second, figure out who left that note. And third, well, third is the hard part. If Dad was right, if something's trying to cross over, I need to stop it. But how do you fight a shadow from another world? I rub my temples, a headache blooming behind my eyes. One step at a time, Jack. Start with Novak. I grab my phone and search for her again. Last I checked, she was at UC Berkeley. Retired, but maybe still kicking. I jot down the physics department's number, planning to call first thing in the morning. As I set the phone down, a noise catches my ear. A soft thump from outside, like something brushing against the house. I freeze, listening. The wind, probably, or a stray branch. But after everything, my nerves are shot. I cross to the window and peer out. The yard's empty, shrouded in pre-dawn gloom, but the shadows seem deeper, almost moving. I blink, and they settle. Just paranoia. I turn away, but a chill lingers, a prickle at the back of my neck. Dad's words echo in my head. It knows my name. It knows I'm the key. If that thing's still out there, still watching, does it know about me too? I shudder, pushing the thought away. I can't afford to spiral. I need to focus, stay sharp. I spend the next hour organizing Dad's journal and the project threshold file, snapping photos of the key pages with my phone. If something happens to me, there needs to be a record, proof that this isn't just a ghost story. By the time I'm done, the sun's creeping over the horizon, weak light filtering through the blinds. I should eat, shower, get ready for work, but my appetite's gone, and the thought of standing under hot water feels like a waste of time. Instead, I sit on the couch, the journal open on my lap, staring at Dad's final entry. Tomorrow? I end this. He never got his tomorrow, but maybe I can finish what he started. Maybe that's why I'm here, why I found the chamber, why the machine called to me. It's a long shot, but it's all I've got. The clock ticks toward my shift, each second a countdown. I don't know what's coming, but I know one thing. I'm not stopping. Not for a note, not for a shadow, not for anything. This is for Dad, and for whatever's waiting on the other side. I never thought a place could feel alive. Not like this. Site 17 used to be just a job, a paycheck, a concrete box buried under miles of dirt and secrets. But now, it's something else. The bunker's changing, and it's not the kind of change you can write off as old pipes or bad wiring. The lights flicker in patterns that make my head hurt. Shadows twist and stretch where they've got no business being. And the air, it's heavy, like it's watching me. I'm alone down here, or at least I'm supposed to be. That's what the logs say, what the cameras show. But I don't believe it anymore. It's 2 a.m., and I'm on my rounds. Flashlight clipped to my belt, boots scuffing against the chipped concrete of Corridor A. The beam cuts through the dark, bouncing off the walls. Gray, cold, same as always. Except they're not. There's a hum now, a low vibration I can feel in my teeth, coming from the direction of the chamber where Dad's machine sits. I found his journal last week, tucked behind a loose panel. And ever since, this place has been unraveling. The barriers are weakening, he wrote. Something's waking. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence is piling up, and it's getting harder to chalk it up to coincidence. I turn a corner, and the lights overhead sputter. Once, twice, then a quick burst like a strobe. I squint, shielding my eyes, and that's when I see it. A shadow, sharp and elongated, spilling across the floor. It's too tall, too thin, and there's nothing casting it. No pipes, no crates, no me. My pulse kicks up, a dull thud in my ears. I swing the flashlight toward it, but it's gone, snapped back into the dark like a rubber band. What the hell? I mutter, my voice flat and small against the silence. I wait, holding my breath, but nothing moves, just the hum, steady and mocking. I shake it off, or try to. I've been down here too long, 16-hour shifts, with nothing but coffee and static on the monitors. My eyes are playing tricks, that's all. But as I keep walking, the lights flicker again, a rhythm that feels deliberate, like Morse code I can't crack. The shadows shift with it, sliding along the walls, stretching into shapes that don't make sense. Claws, spines, things with too many angles. I stop, my hand tightening on the flashlight. Get it together, Jack, I say, louder this time, needing to hear something human. The bunker doesn't answer, but the silence feels thicker now, like it's waiting. Corridor B is next on my route, a narrow stretch that's always been the creepiest part of Site 17. It's where the pipes groan loudest, where the air tastes like rust. I hesitate at the threshold, the beam of my light slicing through the gloom. The hum's stronger here, a pulse I can feel through my boots. I step forward, and the whispers start. They're low at first, a scratchy murmur, just under the hum, like static on a dead radio. I freeze, ears straining. The sound grows, guttural and rough, a grinding noise that's not words, not English, not anything I recognize. It's coming from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off the walls, slithering through the dark. My skin prickles, a cold sweat beading on my neck. Who's there? I call, my voice sharper than I mean it to be. The whispers cut off, leaving a hollow quiet that's somehow worse. I stand there, listening, but all I hear is my own breathing, fast and shallow. I take another step, and the lights flare, bright, then dim, then a stuttering flicker that makes the corridor feel like it's moving. The whispers come back, louder, angrier, a chorus of gravel and hate. I catch a word, or think I do. Threshold. It hisses through the air, sharp and deliberate, and my blood goes cold. That's the name of Dad's project, the one that got him killed, or disappeared, depending on who you ask. I spin around, flashlight sweeping the hall, but it's empty. Show yourself, I shout, my voice cracking. Nothing, just the echo, fading into the dark. I'm shaking now, adrenaline pumping, but I force myself to keep moving. I need to finish my rounds, get back to the control room, write this off as a bad night. But as I reach the end of Corridor B, the lights flicker one last time, and there it is, a figure standing maybe 20 feet away. It's tall, too tall, its limbs stretched like taffy, its head cocked at an angle that hurts to look at. It's not human, not even close. The edges of it blur, like it's made of smoke or shadow, but it's solid enough to make my stomach drop. I blink, and it's gone, just like that. There 1 second, vanish the next. My flashlight stabs at the spot where it stood, but the corridor's empty, the concrete bare. I stumble forward, heart hammering, until I'm standing right where it was, the walls the same as ever, pitted and gray. But then, the light catches something, a symbol, scratched into the stone. It's new, the edges raw and jagged, not like the faded marks I've seen in the chamber. It's a spiral, tight and messy, crossed with sharp, uneven lines. My mouth goes dry. This wasn't here last night. I'd have noticed. I fumble for my phone, hands unsteady, and snap a picture. The flash lights up the symbol, stark and ugly against the wall. I stare at it, my mind racing. It's got to be tied to the machine, to Project Threshold. Dad's journal mentioned symbols, keys, anchors between worlds. He called them. Is this one of them? Did that thing carve it here? I back up, the flashlight trembling in my grip. The bunker feels smaller now, the walls pressing in, the air too thick to breathe. I finish my rounds in a daze, sticking to the main halls, avoiding Corridor B. Every flicker of the lights makes me jump. Every shadow looks like it's reaching for me. By the time I'm back in the control room, I'm a mess. Sweaty, twitchy, my nerves frayed to threads. I collapse into the chair, the monitors glowing with their usual grainy feed. Empty corridors, empty rooms, no figure, no whispers, just me, alone, aren't I? I check the logs, nothing, no power surges, no intruders, no glitches. The cameras didn't catch a damn thing. I rub my eyes, exhaustion settling in, but my brain won't stop. That figure, the symbol, the whispers, they're real. I know they are, and they're connected to Dad, to whatever he unleashed down here. The note in my locker last week said, "Stop looking, or you'll regret it." But I can't stop. Not when I'm this close to figuring out what happened to him. I pull out my phone and scroll through the photos, the machine's gears, the chamber's symbols, and now this new mark. There's a pattern, a logic I can't see yet. If I can decode it, maybe I can shut it down, finish what Dad started. He tried to destroy the machine, but something stopped him. Maybe I can do it right. I think about Dr. Elena Novak, one of Dad's old team members. Her name's on a sticky note in my wallet, along with a number I haven't dared to call. She worked on Project Threshold, might know what these symbols mean. It's too late now, 3:30 a.m. But tomorrow, I'm reaching out. She's my best shot at understanding this mess. The rest of my shift drags on, the bunker's settling into an uneasy quiet. I keep my eyes on the monitors, half expecting that figure to appear, but it doesn't. When my relief shows up at 6 a.m., I'm out the door fast, the cold morning air hitting me like a slap. I drive home, the hum still buzzing in my skull, and crash onto my cot without bothering to undress. Sleep comes hard, but when it does, it's full of dreams, red skies, twisted shapes, and that figure, its eyes glowing like embers, whispering my name. I wake up late, sunlight streaming through the cracked blinds. My phone's got no missed calls, no messages. I splash water on my face, trying to shake the fog, and grab Dad's journal from the drawer. I flip to his sketches of the symbols, comparing them to the photo from last night. They're close, spirals and lines, but this new one's wilder, more jagged. His notes are a mess. The symbols shift when it's close, barriers thin. I swallow hard. If that figure's what he meant by it, then last night was a warning. I dial the number for UC Berkeley, where Novak used to teach. A receptionist picks up, sounding half asleep. Physics department. "I'm looking for Dr. Elena Novak," I say, keeping my voice steady. "Is she still around?" A pause, then clicking keys. She's emeritus now, retired. I can't give out her info, but I can pass a message. Tell her it's about Project Threshold, Site 17, from Jack Thompson, Robert Thompson's son. The line goes quiet for a second. Thompson? As in, yeah, I cut in. That Thompson. I'll let her know, she says, her tone shifting to something softer. I hang up, my gut twisting. If Novak calls back, it'll be a miracle. If she doesn't, I'm on my own. The day drags, my small apartment feeling too tight, too exposed. I pace, jumping at every creak, every shadow. By evening, I'm wired. Too scared to sleep, but too tired to think straight. I collapse anyway, and the dreams come again. Endless corridors, glowing symbols, that figure looming closer. When I wake, it's dark, my phone buzzing on the nightstand. 3 missed calls, blocked number. My heart jumps. Novak? I call back, but it's just voicemail. No greeting. I curse, tossing the phone aside. My shift's in an hour, and the thought of going back to Site 17 makes me sick. But I've got no choice. Answers are there, not here. As I pull on my uniform, a sound stops me cold. A soft, rhythmic scratching. It's coming from the living room. I grab my flashlight and creep down the hall, the beam shaking in my hand. The room's empty, but the noise keeps going, faint and steady. I trace it to the wall behind the couch, where a symbol's etched into the plaster. The same spiral from Corridor B, fresh and deep. My knees buckle. This isn't the bunker. This is my home. I touch it. The edge is rough under my fingers, and a chill runs through me. The hum's in my ears again. Louder. Closer. Whatever's waking in Site 17, it's not staying there. It's spreading. Following me. Marking me. I stumble back, grab my keys, and run to my truck. As I drive to the bunker, the hum grows, a drumbeat in my chest. The shadows aren't just in the corridors anymore. They're everywhere, and they're coming for me. I've never been good at letting things go. It's a flaw, I suppose. One my father used to call stubbornness, masquerading as grit. But these past few days, it's not just stubbornness driving me. It's something deeper, something clawing at the edges of my mind, whispering in the dark. The bunker, Site 17, has gotten under my skin. Those symbols, scratched into the walls, like some madman's graffiti, won't leave me alone. They're in my dreams now, glowing faintly, shifting when I try to look at them. And then there's that figure, tall, warped, its eyes like dying coals, watching me from the shadows of Corridor B. I can't shake the feeling that it's not just in the bunker anymore. Last night, I found one of those symbols carved into my living room wall, fresh as if someone or something had just been there. I need answers, real ones, before I lose what's left of my sanity. That's why I'm here, standing on the sagging porch of a cottage that looks like it's been swallowed by ivy and time. Dr. Evelyn Hart's name popped up in an obscure article I dug out of the library archives. A retired professor who once wrote about Cold War experiments, the kind of stuff that got buried under red tape and denial. If anyone can tell me what those symbols mean, what Project Threshold was really about, it's her. My hands are sweaty as I clutch a folder stuffed with photos and sketches, evidence of the madness I've stumbled into. The late afternoon sun is dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, and the air smells faintly of damp earth and rotting leaves. I knock, the sound swallowed by the heavy wooden door. For a moment, I think no one's home, but then it creaks open, and a woman peers out. She's older, mid-70s maybe, with sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and gray hair pulled into a messy bun. Her face is lined but alert, sizing me up like I'm a stray dog that wandered too close. Yes? Her voice is clipped, tinged with an accent I can't quite place. British, possibly. Doctor? Evelyn Hart? I try to keep my tone steady. I'm Jack Thompson. I called earlier about some research I'm working on. Her eyes narrow, a flicker of suspicion crossing her face. I don't recall agreeing to see anyone. I know, and I'm sorry for just showing up, I say quickly. But it's urgent. I think you might be the only person who can help me. She studies me, her gaze lingering on the folder in my hands, then sighs, a sound more resigned than welcoming. 5 minutes. That's all you get. Thank you, I breathe, stepping inside as she moves aside. The living room is a maze of bookshelves, every inch crammed with volumes on history, science, and things I can't even pronounce. A desk in the corner is buried under maps and papers, and the air smells like old paper and something bitter. Tea, maybe. She points to a threadbare armchair, and I sit, the folder heavy in my lap. So, Mr. Thompson, she says, settling into a chair across from me. What's this about? You mentioned Cold War experiments? I nod, swallowing hard. I work at Site 17, a decommissioned bunker from the 80s. I found something there, a machine covered in strange symbols. I think it's part of a project called Threshold. My father worked on it, and now I hesitate, searching for the right words. Things are happening, weird things. Her expression shifts. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. Threshold, she repeats, her voice softening. That's a name I haven't heard in years. What kind of weird things? I open the folder and pull out the photos. The machine in the bunker's depths, its metal surface etched with spirals and jagged lines. The walls of Corridor B scarred with the same markings, and the symbol from my living room, its edges still raw. I hand them to her, watching her reaction. Her hands are steady as she takes them, but as she flips through, her eyes widen, just a fraction. These symbols, she says, almost to herself, tracing one with a fingertip. Where did you find them? In the bunker, carved into the walls, I say, and now in my apartment. They're tied to whatever's going on. I need to know what they are. She sets the photos down on the coffee table between us, her lips thinning. They're not from the Cold War, I can tell you that. They're much older. Sumerian, possibly older. Wards, meant to keep something out. My chest tightens. Wards against what? She meets my gaze, her eyes sharp and unyielding. Something ancient. The Sumerians believed in boundaries, places where the world we know brushes against something else. These symbols were their protection, their way of sealing off what shouldn't cross over. Like Site 17, I say, the pieces clicking together. That's what Threshold was, wasn't it? An experiment to break through those boundaries. She nods, slow and deliberate. There were rumors back then, wild ones, even by Cold War standards. Experiments to tap into other dimensions, to harness whatever was on the other side. Site 17 was one of the locations, or so the whispers went. But it was all shut down, buried. Too dangerous, they said. My father was part of it, I say, my voice rough. Dr. Robert Thompson. He was the lead scientist until he disappeared in '85. Her face pales, just enough for me to notice. Thompson. I remember him. Brilliant man. Wrote a paper on spatial anomalies that raised a lot of eyebrows. I didn't realize he was tied to Threshold. He was, I say, pulling his journal from the folder and setting it on the table. I found this, his notes about the machine. The symbols, something waking up. He was trying to stop it. She leans forward, her fingers hovering over the journal, but not touching it. Waking up? What do you mean? There's something down there, I say, the words spilling out. I've seen it. A figure, tall and twisted, with eyes that burn. It's been appearing, leaving these symbols. It's like it's trying to get out. Her hands drop to her lap, trembling slightly. You've seen it? Yeah, I say, my throat dry. In the bunker. And now, closer. It's following me. She sits back, her face a mask of control, but I can see the cracks. Jack, you need to leave this alone. Whatever's on the other side of that breach, it's not for us to meddle with. Those symbols, the machine, they're holding it back. If you keep digging, you could undo everything. But it's already undoing itself, I counter, my voice rising. The symbols are showing up outside the bunker. It's in my home now. I can't just walk away. Then you should, she says firmly. Quit your job, leave town, get as far from Site 17 as you can. Some things aren't worth understanding. I stare at her, frustration burning in my gut. My father thought they were. He died trying to stop this. Or at least, that's what I think happened. If I don't finish what he started, who will? Finish it how? She snaps. By destroying the machine. You don't even know what it does. It might be the only thing keeping that breach closed. She's right, and I hate it. I don't have a plan, just a desperate need to do something. Is there a way to close it for good? She sighs, rubbing her forehead. Possibly. The symbols aren't just wards. They're a system, a way to control the breach. If you could decipher them, you might be able to reinforce the seal. But it's a long shot, and it's dangerous. One misstep, and you could let it through. I think of Dad's journal, his scribbled notes about the symbols changing, the barriers weakening. He was onto something, but he didn't finish. Can you help me figure them out? I'm a historian, not an expert on ancient languages, she says, hesitating. But I can point you in the right direction. I have some books, references that might help. It's not ideal, but it's something. I'll take it. She rises and crosses to a bookshelf, pulling down a few heavy tomes. Sumerian inscriptions, rituals of the ancient Near East, symbols of power. She hands them to me, her expression grim. Be careful, Jack. This isn't academic curiosity. Whatever's watching you, it's been waiting a long time. It's patient, and it's cunning. I nod, the weight of the books grounding me. One last thing. Did you ever hear anything about my father after 85? Her face shudders, her eyes sliding away. Number. He disappeared, like the project. That's all I know. She's hiding something. I can feel it in the tightness of her voice, the way she won't meet my gaze. But I've pushed her as far as she'll go. Thanks, Doctor. Hart, I say, standing. I appreciate this. As I head for the door, she stops me, her voice low. Jack, don't trust what you see. It can play tricks, get inside your head. If you feel it pulling, get out. A chill settles over me, but I nod and step outside. The door closes behind me, and the evening air bites at my skin. The sky's darkening, shadows pooling in the yard, and I feel exposed, like something's watching from the trees. I glance back at the cottage, but it's just Dr. Hart's silhouette in the window, motionless. The drive home is quiet, my mind racing. Leave it alone, she'd said, echoing that note I found in Dad's journal, scrawled in his shaky hand. But I can't. It's too late. Whatever's waking up, it's already got its hooks in me. Back at my apartment, I spread the books across the kitchen table, their pages brittle and yellowed. I start flipping through, hunting for anything that matches the symbols. It's slow. Paragraphs of dense text, sketches of clay tablets, myths about gods and monsters. Then I find it, a section on Sumerian wards, with drawings of spirals and jagged lines labeled as bindings. The text calls them protections against entities from the void, beings that slipped through the cracks of the world. Feeding on fear, my pulse quickens. There is a footnote, faint pencil marks in Dad's handwriting, resonance patterns. He'd been here, chasing the same thread, linking the symbols to the machine. I dig into his journal, cross-referencing his notes, equations, frequencies, something about stabilizing the breach. He was close, so close, but the deeper I read, the worse it gets. The Sumerians didn't just fear random spirits. They named something specific, the Sentinel of the Veil, a presence that watched from beyond, waiting for the wards to fail. The symbols were its prison, and if they broke, I closed the book, my hands shaking. That's what I've been seeing, the Sentinel stirring awake, reaching for me. Dr. Hart's warning rings in my ears. It's cunning. I've been feeding it every time I go near the machine, every time I dream of those endless corridors. I grab my phone, checking for a response from Dr. Novak, my old professor, the only other person who might know something. Nothing yet. I fire off another text. It's worse than we thought. The Sentinel's breaking through. Help me. A sound cuts through the silence. Scratching, faint but deliberate, coming from the hallway. My stomach drops. I grab a flashlight and edge toward the noise, the beam shaking in my hand. The symbol on the wall is there, its lines glowing faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. A shadow flickers at the edge of my vision, long, distorted. But when I turn, it's gone. I stumble back, locking myself in the bedroom. My breath comes in shallow gasps as I slide down against the door. The book's clutched tight. The scratching fades, but the hum in my head doesn't. It's close now, closer than ever. I don't sleep, just sit there, waiting for morning, knowing I can't run from this. Not anymore. And so, the journey pauses here, for now. The next chapter awaits. Keep your lanterns lit and your curiosity sharp. The story is far from over. Part 2, coming next week.